Greetings, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. Sorry about my voice here. A little drink of water will help. My special guest today is Claudio Viberti, who's the winemaker at Giovanni Viberti Winery in Vergne. Did I pronounce that little frazione correctly, Vergne?
It's a Barolo frazione called Vergne.
Vergne, okay. Yeah, it's just, if you're in Barolo, it's just above and outside the town. It's a tiny little frazione. It's the term they use. We would call it suburb here in the United States. And Claudia, first thing I want to say is that not only, thank you for this opportunity, but I've known you for about 5 years and have had lunches and dinners with you. We'll talk about restaurants and food and as well as wine today. But, there's so many great producers these days in Barolo, and Barolo has taken on such a great acclaim lately. And it's like, there's always famous producers and there's always producers that don't get the recognition they deserve. And you're in that latter category. And as I like to tell people, it's not, producers are famous and it doesn't necessarily mean their wines are great. And also the producers that aren't as famous, it doesn't necessarily mean that their wines are any less. It's just a strange way of how the world works and why one winery gets all the attention and another winery doesn't. So I'm glad to be able to tell your story today, or have you tell your story anyway. So Claudio, the winery is Giovanni Viberti, and we're going to talk a lot about Barolo today, but also about Barbera, because that's a very important wine with him. And we're also going to talk about restaurants. So I will put up some pictures here. Claudio sent me a very detailed PowerPoint presentation. So we're going to look at that quite a bit, and we'll go back and forth with some photos as well. But we want to link this in. When you first talk about Viberti, you have to talk about his parents' restaurant, which is called Buon Padre in Vergne. And let's go through.
Here we are.
Go back to the slideshow view here. So tell us what we're looking at here.
That's basically the house back in the 1898, this picture, and this was the house that was just on the border within Barolo, and then the valley that we call Fondo Valle, so the end of the valley, and then take you to Liguria, basically the road that take you towards Liguria, the seaside. People that used to trade, people that used to travel through Piedmont and Liguria, they used to pass cross our house, and we were always giving like full service from alimentari, so a grocery store, to tobaccos and a restaurant, osteria, including also, as you see in the sign, albergo, so a little hotel with a couple of rooms above to rest a few hours. Was what we can say a public house where people use a lot of services. And basically is also where my family started back in the 1920s to produce its own private label, so its own wine that was not even say Barolo in the label. They were labeling the wine as a Vino del Buon Padre. So the brand that they used to promote was Buon Padre, was the name of this house. And that's how everything started. That's how our path in the wine business started. And in the 1920s, we started to make wine that was exclusively served in our restaurant and also sold in the restaurant.
Okay. Here's a picture of it today.
Yeah, today time, the house was obviously over the years was renovated, was built, expanded, and you can still find, if you visit here, the restaurant, the tobacco shop, the grocery store, and underground, the first cellar we have been used between 1921 and 1959 to produce this Buon Padre label. And in the first floor, there's not anymore the hotel, but nowadays is our main offices with our administration and commercial offices. Let's say the family over the year expanded in both wine business and restaurant business.
And a couple years ago, I ate with you and your father in that little kind of closed I'm not sure exactly what you call it there, but that extension on the end. And when was that built?
The really extension that you can see on the right left, the small terrace you mean,
Yes.
it's used to be actually over there a big trees planted, but the problem this tree was the roots. They were so deep that they become a big danger for the house because they were like they were destroying the part of the house. So we have to cut the bottom part of the tree, and on top of it we have built this small terrace that is actually the terrace that divided the commune of Barolo within the other commune, the other neighbor communes. That's also why the city hall always obligate us to put the name, the old sign, Comune di Barolo, as an indicator of where the Barolo commune start.
Yeah, I remember you telling me, depending on whether you're heading north or south, this spot right here is the beginning or the end of Barolo, depending on your trip. So, and it's
Yes.
a famous monument. But that little veranda is just, and it's facing west, so you just see the sunset. If you're, depending on the time of year, it could be the sun goes down so late, it could be 9:30 at night, maybe even 10 o'clock, and it's just it's magnificent on a beautiful.
It's the mountains that look at our closest Alps, where we have our highest point, that is the Monviso mountain. That is one of our highest mountains that are in the south of Piedmont, basically.
That was a really special night. I've had so many great memories in Barolo and Barbaresco and really all the Langhe and Piemonte, and that was one of my favorites. That was really great. So,
you will come back. As soon as the COVID finish, I will see you again.
Absolutamente. So this is your mother, Maria?
Yeah, that's definitely the human spirit behind the winery and behind the restaurant business, as she was the one that for 52 years ran the kitchen of Buon Padre. Nowadays, she's still making every morning what we consider our flagship pasta at Buon Padre, that is the tagliarine. We do the hand cut every morning. And we dedicate her recently, last year, and you have visited, a restaurant in center of Barolo that the name is La Gemella, meaning twin sister, because my mom is a twin sister. So actually the human spirit of my mom is also basically in our newest restaurant in the center of the village.
And there's a picture I took when I had lunch with you at La Gemella.
Yes.
If you go to Barolo, it's right at the end of the square, right? You pull in at the one end near the winery of Bartolo Mascarello. Just across the way is the parking lot, and then just right opposite that parking lot is where the shops are, and that's where this restaurant is, and it's absolutely beautiful, and cooking is wonderful. So I highly recommend it, and a very, very extensive wine list. So really well thought out and not terribly expensive. So, and we can go back to this later, but since we're talking about La Gemella, here's one of the dishes that I had. Tell me what we're having here.
This was a shoulder filet, what we say il finto filetto, the fake filet. It's a piece of meat, especially here it's out of the veal meat, so it's a younger cow. And we do sous vide cooking, and then we just finish in grill according to what is the customer request, if he likes rare, medium, or well-cooked one. Okay.
It's absolutely wonderful. And tell me about the restaurant, about the business now. I mean, this has been such a strange year, but is the restaurant open? How much tourism are you getting? How much business are you getting at the restaurant?
Hello, the update news about our restaurant side business is we opened as soon as we were allowed it, so it was May 28th. And we opened both locations with a new concept, 7 days a week, because we were expecting less tourism. So we were trying to give not just the same service as always, but giving extra service 7 days a week. And we do in the weekend kitchen open all day long. That is pretty unusual for Italian. Definitely we have less tourism, especially overseas. There is almost no one, but we started 2 weeks ago to see more clientele from Switzerland in North Europe, including Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Belgium, and Holland. Most of the, let's say that for the Gemella was a little bit more difficult, as was new, and it was in charge to build its own clientele. While for Buon Padre was easy to get back on track because of the old history of the restaurant. It's a restaurant open for over 100 years, so we had a great coming back from our customer, and a great response and support, let's call it, from our customer. So business is definitely lower. I will consider now we are 40% lower, but what we wish is to keep strong, and what we say is we want to see the Christmas trees, because if we're gonna see the Christmas trees, means next year will be good, because I can't see worse scenery than this year. Just one information, Buon Padre was never closed in this history, even during the First and Second War. So for
Really?
my family, especially my mother, having forced to be closed for almost 2 months and a half from an enemy that was invisible enemy,
Exactly.
was very difficult. And I will say that especially my mom in the family suffer a lot to see no one around us, no one in the restaurant. For someone that is in the business for over 50 years, don't see anyone in a restaurant and see, the forced closure, it's really bad. But she's back on track, she's good, and we hope to be on our new normality next year.
Yeah, well, you're still ahead of many places in the United States. So I guess at this point we all have to be a little bit grateful for whatever business we can get. But I can imagine, with your parents, it must have been difficult. So, but I'm glad to hear that you're back open, and especially you're getting support from a lot of people, from Switzerland and Germany and that drive down. So you've had such a good loyal clientele. And one other comment, our mutual friend, I think you know him, Manuel Bergi. Manuel, ciao. He types here for everyone watching today. He says, La Gemella is a fantastic place, both the food and the wine list. Bravissimi. So, and I totally agree with that.
Let me say the wine list at La Gemella, it's a little bit the story of my life, because I built a wine list with over 400 labels that are each label represent a piece of my history, a piece of my life over my trip and over my career. While Buon Padre is, as you know, historically a mono-brand wine list, right, where you have to drink the Viberti Barolos in any occasion you visit Buon Padre.
Yeah, but that's a great place to start from. But that wine list too, let me add too, I'm sure everyone watching here today is a fan of champagne. And there are so many wonderful champagnes and some very small growers on the wine list at La Gemella. So yeah, even more of a reason to go there. So anyway, let's go back to that PowerPoint and let's talk about, I think we're going to go back and talk about Barolo, because that's your main wine. Other again.
There you are.
Got to get this hooked up. I'm sorry about this. 1 second. I know I'll get this if you just give me a second here.
No problem.
That's just the cellar at the restaurant, Buon Padre.
Correct.
Now let's go to the winery.
So the winery that you see in the picture is actually the really first winery operated to make wine back in 1920s. Over there, we were just making two vineyards, Bricco delle Viole parcel and La Volta parcel, that blended together, they were giving us the Buon Padre Barolo label. But since the 1960s, my father built another cellar, about 300 meters far away from Buon Padre, where he started to vinify more and more vineyards, especially vineyards that were like more parcel from Bricco delle Viole, more parcel from La Volta, and more parcel from San Pietro. Those three vineyards, especially from that time, the 60s until the 1989, they were fully part of the Barolo Buon Padre. But beside the production of Barolo with the new cellar, my father started to produce also Barbera wine. Barbera that is used to be and is still a big passion of the family. While everybody in Barolo, they are very focused on Barolo, we still have focus on Barolo, but I can easily say, as you know, Tom, we are currently one of the winery that is investing and is making more Barbera d'Alba than ever in our region. The new cellar here that you can see is currently used only for the alcoholic fermentation, and we manage for the fermentation in two different type of barrel. In front of you we have a horizontal barrel like a roto fermenter that works mostly for submerged cap of fermentation that I will easily say we use for 100% of our Barberas, but we don't use for any of our parcel of Barolo. Just few parcel of our Barolo are vinified this way, while most of the parcel of the Nebbiolo works, as you see in the right and the left side, with tanks that works with emerged skin cap, so traditional fermentation.
Okay. Here are the vertical barrels, which you age your Barolo in.
Yeah, this type of wood barrel we use to store all our Barolos vineyards and Barbera vineyards. And I will really I love to point out that we don't blend the grapes for our Barolo Buon Padre as some producer does for the Barolo Classico, but we vinify from the alcoholic fermentation through the aging each single parcel separately, and we do blend each of the single parcel at the end of the aging. This is very important process for us for making a very consistency for the quality over the vintages. And it's also something that reflects the difference in ripening we have in every parcel. Because if you take Bricco delle Viole vineyards, is one of the latest parcel we harvest because of this altitude. While we have parcel down in Barolo, for example, Albarella, that they are the first one we harvest. Sometimes there is 10 days, 12 days difference. So it's very important to pay attention and, work each parcel differently. This is something maniac. As long as you can imagine, we work with 10 crews, but out of the 10 crews, we manage over 60 different parcels. But for us, it's fundamental to give the specific style and consistency for the Barolo Buon Padre.
I want to talk a little bit about the history of Barolo, because you go back a long, long way. And from what I understand, the first vintage, your classic Barolo, and you still produce it every year, is called Buon Padre. That's like sort of the house wine at the restaurant. This goes back to 1927, is that correct? Was your first vintage?
1923 was the first vintage for the Barolo Buon Padre.
23,
Even if to be 23, but to be very precise, the first vintage and the first wine produced was in 1921 and was the Barbera Bricco that is nowadays the only parcel of Barbera planted in the Bricco delle Viole crew vineyards.
Okay. So we're looking at at least two, if not three, different phases of history with Barolo at your winery. And this goes back to the 1920s when it was Antonio Viberti and then your father Giovanni throughout the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. And then I first met your brother, Gianluca, who's now making his own wine. And he showed me around. And you've been involved since the kind of
2008.
2008. That was your first vintage, okay? Excellent vintage. And you also produce a number of single vineyard reserva wines, which started in 1989, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, the winemaking, the production of the single vineyards was dated back 1989 with the really first vintage. And since the real beginning, we never want to produce single vineyards wine every vintage for the simple reason that the average size of our vineyards, as you well know, it's extremely small. I will even say less than half hectare in some cases. So having the perfect condition of ripening every single vintage, it's extremely difficult. So for our internal policy, for something that we always wanted, it's always try to produce the best wine possible. And making excellent terroir-driven wines every vintage is impossible. So we only produce those single vineyards bottling in what are terroir driven, so in vintages that actually reflect the terroir and potential long life cellar vintages. So to give an idea, since 1989 till nowadays, we have bottled 15 vintages so far of our single vineyards.
Okay, now here's a map of all the Cru single vineyards, the MGA in Barolo, in the Barolo zone, I should say. Of course, we're going to Barolo down right in here. And now let's look at your vineyards. Oh. Well, I'll push all this ahead and so we can just see it once. But these are all vineyards that you work with in Barolo. We're going to talk about some of those things you did.
As you notice,
go ahead.
You're fine. Finish. Okay. As you notice, most of our vineyards are concentrated in the left side of the Barolo area. The left side, that is basically the west coast of the Barolo area, and also we are mostly concentrated in the highest part of the municipality of Barolo. Our vineyards tend to be 80% in altitude between 400 and 500 meters above sea level. I can give an example of Fossati Alessandria, Bricco delle Viole, La Volta, Bergera, San Pietro, and basically also part of the Ravera. This map shows you exactly all the vineyards that are managed by our family estate. To be very clear, the P and the O you see beside each of the vineyards indicate which vineyards are owned vineyards and which vineyards are purchased grapes. 85% is owned vineyards and only 15% is purchased grapes. The purchased grapes are coming from Montbeliero, Ravera, Perno, especially, and single bottling are from Bricco delle Viole, San Pietro, La Volta, and recently we have been added Ravera, and from next year we will release also Montbeliero.
So the Montbeliero.
Bricco delle Viole, La Volta. Bricco delle Viole, San Pietro, and Ravera are aged for 5 years minimum in oak before being bottled. So they released as a reserva wines. Montbeliero next year with the vintage 2017 won't be released as a reserva, but will be released with our Buon Padre released, as Montbeliero is one of the few vineyards that doesn't need, in our opinion, long aging in oak. So we already actually bottled the wine a couple of weeks ago, And the wine it's definitely more fragile, more thin, elegant, and it doesn't have the shoulder or the tannin aspect as you can find in the other crus we're working with.
Well, you will be one of the choice few wineries to bottle it from Montpellier, who's not located in Verduno. But how many bottles of that 2017 have you produced?
Allora, Montpellier is a contract I have made with my ex-schoolmate that made a study with me in the enology school of Alba. His name is Diego Mora, and we made an agreement of a parcel that is 0.6 hectare for the next 20 years,
Okay.
1,400 bottles.
Okay, your sound went out a little bit there. How many hectares?
It's a 0.6 hectare, 6,000 square meter.
Okay, and this is the 2017 vintage, which I'm sure people know is a warm, actually rather hot vintage. So what will that wine be like? I think a lot of people are afraid 2017 will not be a very good vintage.
2017, the winner will be the people, the farmer that made a good compromise making decision in the harvest operation, because the winner are the one that do not check too much the sugar ripening, the alcohol, but they check and they pay more attention on the acid level, because 17, the risk is having very alcoholic wines with low acidity, so very flat with not vibrant taste.
Right.
We have done pretty anticipated harvest, and we have done not too long maturation in oak for every cruise. Some cruise claimed longer time in oak for maturation, but for example, vineyards like Montpellier, we noticed after 2 years that the time in oak was totally enough.
Okay, and this was made similar to the other Barolos, right, in the large casks, correct?
Yeah, where the style is always the same. The way we use to store and to age our Barolos, it's a large oak barrel, obviously different sizes according to the size of the vineyards, but most important, 100% of our barrel are no toasted oak. So we don't toast barrel, we use only steamed oak barrel on the way always to evolve and show the varietal flavor, the grapes terroir flavor, versus covering the flavor with, oaky, vanilla, boisé.
Okay, and let me ask about Rivera. You mentioned it briefly that you aged it for 5 years, released it as the Reserva. Your first bottling, which is, I guess, sold out now, was the 2013 vintage, correct?
It was 2013.
Yes.
Released of last year, but was sold out very quick. So I have a few bottles left in my winery. When people visit me, I will be happy to share a bottle together.
You just answered my question, so that's great. But is the fruit from Rivera that you work with, is that on the Novello side or the Barolo side of Rivera?
Is Rivera Barolo side.
Barolo side, okay. All right, well, let's talk about some of these single vineyard Barolo that you make as well. I got to go through this again, okay? Learn how to use this thing. One of your top single vineyard wines is Bricco delle Viole. People may know that vineyard from a lovely release from a couple different wineries. One I think is Marengo, and the other is GD Vira. So this is in the commune of Barolo. Tell us all about this vineyard and the wine.
So the vineyards, it's a pretty large area on top of the village of Barolo. As you were mentioning before, the Bricco delle Viole is one of the highest in altitude. We are between 390, 400 meters up to almost 500 meters above sea level. As you see in the map, I designed the map putting like a red light in the middle, because the Bricco delle Viole is divided in two sides. a lower side that is the one on the lower end of the map, and an upper side that is the one on top of the picture. We own parcel in both lower and upper side. The two sides are divided by a road that crosses the frazione di Vergne, that is the little village where we are located. But what's the major difference? The major difference is the upper part, it's more hikey as a hill, and we tend to have more like not evoluted soil. The erosion when we have a phenomenal atmospheric phenomenon like rain, it's bigger than the lowest part that is a more gentle hill, and the type of soil is a little bit more complex. We have more clay soil in the upper part and more like limestone and clay in the lower part.
Okay.
The parcel in the upper part are all dedicated to the Buon Padre Barolo, while the parcel in the lower part, it's fully dedicated on our single vineyard, Bricco delle Viole. It's a parcel that is 5,000 square meter, half hectare, when we get out 3,500, 3,700 bottles on an average vintage. The ownership we have here, it's about 3.4 hectares, and recently we have done a new new contract with a local grower. We're going to be up to 4.5 hectares. So basically, we own about 10% of the total crew in Bricco delle Viole. Very interesting is also the type of nose you tend to have in the wines, because the upper parcel of the vineyards that we use for the Buon Padre, they always shows you more fruitier and dense wines, extremely lively with the acidity. While the lower part, the one that we use for the Bricco delle Viole single vineyards, has a specific nose of mint, camphor, balsamic more in general, that can be more or less intense according to the vintage. I'm very happy that over our interview, we have Manuel that is texting us now live, that about a week ago visited me personally, and we had the opportunity to visit both parcel and to try the wines from barrel to the bottled wine, and he had a great experience in what I was meaning for mint and balsamic.
That's great. I'm passionate about Barolo, but he may even exceed my passion. I mean, he really loves it. Of course, he's fortunate enough to be living a lot closer than I am, but still, that's not an excuse. But it's been great to meet him through Facebook. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to meet him in Barolo one day. You mentioned the soil, but that term you used, evoluted, I'm not familiar with that. What exactly do you mean by that? You say evoluted soil.
Generally, as you well know, the Langhe area is a very hilly area. So when the hill tend to be very like hikey, very deep hill, you have to know that during the rain, when we have a strong rain, the erosion is very like it's very often not a problem, but is a problem. But at the same time, tend to show the upper part, so the upper part soil as the underground soil. So the soil is always the same as the underground one. But when the hill is a little bit more gentle, there is less erosion. So you tend to have the upper soil, the superficial soil, that is definitely more evoluted, because in this case, the atmospheric condition tend to modify the texture and the chemical condition of the soil.
Okay, thank you. I forgot to hit that before, but there's the red circles and the green circles. So you said that.
Yeah, the red parcel are fully used for the Buon Padre, and only the green parcel, the green circle, is the parcel we use for the Bricco delle Viole.
Okay.
So we always use the same parcel. We never change parcel for our single vineyards Bricco delle Viole. If you look at the label of the Bricco delle Viole, you always have on the bottom of the label the number of bottles produced by that parcel in that vintage.
There's the bottle there, Bricco delle Viole. I'm curious, you always release this as a riserva. Would you release it as a non-riserva Barolo in any particular year, or is that not?
No, always riserva Barolo, Bricco delle Viole, riserva San Pietro, riserva La Volta, and riserva Ravera. The only not riserva wines will be released by the Viberti will be obviously except the Buon Padre, the Montvilliers next year.
Okay, let's go back to the presentation here. There's a little bit more detailed map of the Bricco delle Viole. There's the label right there.
Yes.
And that section that is used for the Riserva 2013 is the current release.
2013 current release, and from September we will release 2014 that you will see less bottle, just 2,800 bottles roughly produced.
Okay, I have to ask you because I am a big fan of 2014 Barolo, and I know it was a challenging year, and you know the early reports there were hail and there was a lot of rain and it's a cool vintage. And, you know, every vintage is different. 2014 to me made wines that, you know, were more subdued and not as ripe and as rich as 2013, for example. But classic wines, I talked to many other producers that said, you know, it was a cool vintage and Nebbiolo loves the cool weather. And these are very structured wines. They have very good acidity. Tell me about 14, about what you think about the character of 14.
Allow me to say that a good producer making good wine in vintages like 14, because I'm pretty sure, Tom, including the Buon Padre samples you have tried, but among the other 2016, most of the 2016 are beautiful wine.
Yes.
But a good producer should show his potential during vintages like 14. 14 had a lot of rain over the month of May and July. And we had to do a lot of intervention in the vineyards, especially for grape selection. We have done 2 times green harvest and 1 grape selection just a couple of weeks before the real harvest. We dropped 30-35% the production. The grapes were in good shape. But the reason why we dropped so many fruit is we had to allow the ripening to go quicker. Otherwise, it was not the weather condition to ripe the whole entire production. The managing of the rain was definitely easier in the Barbaresco area because they have a higher percent of sand, so the rains drain more. In the Barolo area, some vineyards showed better results than other vineyards. I have to be honest, in 2014, I only produced as a single vineyard the Bricco delle Viole and the Ravera, because most of the grapes from La Volta and San Pietro, they're supposed to be single bottling. Yes. I have used 100% of the production for give better support to the Buon Padre Barolo.
Okay. And you also
here's your favorite.
Right, your Bricco Airoli Barbera from a part of Bricco delle Viole. Tell us about that vineyard, or that section of the vineyard.
Allora, this is the only parcel nowadays, because used to be more parcel of Barbera in the past, but in Bricco delle Viole, step by step, all the producer replanted Barbera with Nebbiolo for a simple economic reason, Tom. It was more, profitable. My family planted these vineyards almost 100 years ago, and we always maintain these vineyards in clonal selection. So we are always replanted the missing vines or the vines that were like dying over the years with the same clone reproducing with the same DNA of the vineyards. It's a vineyard that is a little bit than a hectare, and we grow, so we farm the vineyards and we produce the wine as a Barolo. As you notice, the vintage we have sent you as a sample is a 2016,
Yes,
so
yes.
exactly the same time as a Barolo. The only thing I was describing to you before is for this specific wine, we have started a new wave to interpret the vintage, because from this year, we don't release the following vintage, 2017, because it's not mature yet as a Barbera, but we're gonna release before 2018, and later will be released 2017. Barbera, especially in hot vintage, give great results, but to reach the maturation, the balance needs a little bit more time.
Okay, so yes, we talked about that before, and I said that's a little bit like certain champagne producers lately. They released their 2009 before they released their 2008, because the 2008
Yes.
gave time. So, but you see that in champagne, but you don't see it too often with a Barbera producer. So that's a credit to your philosophy. So, and tell us about 2018 and also 19 while we're at it, because the wines I've tasted out of barrels so far have, and from what people have told me, these are two lovely vintages.
Yeah, I mean, 2018 and 19, they are in the same wavelength as ready-to-drink vintages. They won't be vintages for extra maturation, in oak aging, because when we pick the grapes, the acid level was pretty mild, was pretty low, and already like integrated in the alcohol level. So we noticed that the wine, even after a year, they were already very mature and very like ready to drink. Beautiful, lovely vintages that will show basically this easier approach in the drinkability. For example, I have one white called Rinato that is a Chardonnay, the only white wine we produce. This label 2018 was released actually immediately 1 year after its production, because it was very ready to drink. So we expect to release 18 and 19 very early, while, for example, as I said before, 17 will be released a little bit later.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the Rinato. Here we are. Okay. The Rinato means, for the people who doesn't know the translation of the name, reborn, because this label was produced by my father back in 1988, and I bring back on in 2018. New vineyards I replanted in 2014. It's Chardonnay. As you know, Barolo village doesn't have any local white grapes. It's not like Novello, where they have the Inaccetta. And it's a little bit different than what my father used to do, because the reason why we interrupt to make this wine was because my father used to age this wine in oak, and I didn't like the international nose and taste he used to give to the wine.
Right.
So I changed the wine into a new process that is lees aged. Basically, we ferment, as you see in the picture, in 6 different tonneaux, part of the wine. Then we blend, leasen the wine after the fermentation in stainless steel tanks, and we keep the wine on its lees for about a year before doing unfiltered bottling. Okay,
I look forward to trying that vintage. Let's go back to some of the Barolos here. Talk about the Rosado at the end here. Backwards here. Here is Bricco delle Viole, and here are the sections that you source for
San Pietro.
Buon Padre Barolo.
Yes.
Anything special?
Correct. These are the upper part parcel.
And are these the grapes in that upper parcel? Are they picked earlier than the ones that go into the Reserva?
No, they picked at the same time. They are not picked in different timing. Basically, we check the ripening level, but there is not a big difference within the other parcel.
Okay. Let's go to San Pietro, another of your Riserva Barolo. Tell us about this, right adjacent to Bricco delle Viole.
Oh, San Pietro. So San Pietro is the smallest crew in Barolo commune. It's the name comes from the chapel of San Pietro that overlook the top of the vineyards, and here we own about 1 hectare out of the 17 hectare of the total surface. The crew, it's for some opinionists, even from Masnaghetti, for example, as long as the hill turn a little bit west, looking at Fossati and La Morra, some journalists in the past always used to say that was not an optimal condition for the Nebbiolo, but as most of our consumer and the results have done, we prove over the past 10, 15 vintages, let's say since 2003, give to this wine the award it deserves, because the San Pietro nowadays is one of the best vineyards in Barolo. The altitude and actually the slightly west exposure gives a very good condition, especially in warmer vintage that we tend to have more and more often in the nowadays. The difference within the other single vineyards on the San Pietro is here we don't have really the balsamic, the minty flavor like in Bricco delle Viole, but we tend to have more like the tar feeling, what the French call the goudron. And it's also the only of my single vineyards that I aged 5 in oak and 1 year in stainless steel. So I don't do the full time in oak, but I do part of the time in stainless steel for an old system, an old method that was used by my father.
Okay, I noticed you write down that the geology here is the Mar di Sant'Agata fossile.
Marne di Sant'Agata is the type of the geology of our soil, and I will say that the Marne di Sant'Agata are mostly like richer in clay. So clay is definitely our major substrate soil.
And how do these differ from the Serravalian soils that you find in Serralunga?
In terms of wine, you tend to have in the west part of the Barolo area, including our vineyards, a little bit more gentle tannin and perfumed nose and fruitier nose. The one that comes from the East Coast, especially, for example, Serralunga, they tend to give more austere tannin, more drier and big shoulder tannin.
Okay. Let's look at the chapel, as you mentioned.
That's the chapel.
Yep. There's the label, Riserva San Pietro. Yes. Now another Riserva is La Volta. Tell us about that vineyard.
La Volta, I can tell you a little bit about La Volta. Again, I cross the vineyards, the cruise into two sides. There is one left side.
Go ahead.
Yes. This is the castle of La Volta. Basically, is the name. The name of the vineyards, La Volta, is after the name of the castle that is called La Volta. The vineyards, as I say, has two major sides. The side that is just behind the road that take you from Barolo to Novello. And then there is another side that it's just behind the castle. We own the major side behind the castle, and we produce here wines with great dense fruit nose. Here you never get the balsamic, you never get the ethereal nose, but you have a nice fruitier nose that is extremely appreciated in the younger stage. The soil and exposure, it's pretty homogeneous, as I say in the writing, all over the La Volta area. The only side that is not really the same is the side that crossed the castle towards the road that go to Novello, that has a different type of geology. Here, small information is we have replanted the vineyards back in 2012, and so we did not produce the wine for 4 vintages. You will see again the La Volta wine being released from next year. The reason why we have replanted is because we had big rain, especially in 2011. In the summer of 2011, that stuck an underground drain and flowed a little bit part of the vineyard. So we decided to replant the old vineyards from scratch.
Okay. Picture again, lovely picture. There's the label, La Volta Riserva. So the next release will be what vintage?
Next vintage will be 2015 and will be released September next year. I will make sure you have a bottle to try in early January.
Thank you, thank you. Okay. Now, your other Barbera, La Gemella, the twin, named for your mother, is sourced from, tell us about this little map here.
La Gemella is one of the latest projects because we start to produce this label back in 2004 with a couple of vineyards that we decided to go through a little bit more stronger like green harvest, producing no more than 7 ton hectare versus the traditional 9 ton hectare, 10 ton hectare in some cases of Barbera vineyards. The project will change over the years because we decide planting new vineyard to do not do more like low yields per hectare, but do low yields per vine. So nowadays we own a huge vineyards altogether of 9 hectares planted with an average density of 6,000 vines a hectare, producing no more than 1.2 kilo of grapes. In this way, we can reach the same goal, but we can give sustainability to the whole vineyards and to the whole project. La Gemella, that means twin sister, is a label dedicated to my mom, and is one of the few Barbera where you can really find a remarkable style of juiciness and lively acidity. We don't use oak at all here. We use the work on lees on the way to give a nice creaminess on the wine, but the wine is as a style extremely clean, leaner and bright with a nice blueberry nose.
I agree. I just tried it earlier today. Are the clones different here than in the Airoli?
2 clone here. I can't say the Bricco Airoli clone because it's over 100 years. So we're just maintaining the same DNA, but we don't know the name of the clone. While here we use 2 specific clones that were, one is from Asti, and one is was selected here in the Cuneo province. And I have a company that support us when we plant new vineyards, because we always plant every plot 50% with one clone and 50% with the other clone. The 2 clone name are, are AT84. 80 means Asti, because comes from Asti. 84 is the number of the clone. And then CN 140, CN stays for Cuneo, that is the province where the clone comes from, and 140 is the number of clone. We always use those 2 clones.
Okay. And then, yes, you mentioned the Chardonnay earlier, comes from this
area.
area.
The Rinato is the new parcel planted, and the Rinato get the same label that used to be my father label, but my father never gave a name to this wine. It's just Chardonnay, was just saying Chardonnay. I call it Rinato because it's actually a reborn label.
Okay. Try this again. A little problem here. Moving on to the next slide. Lost my browser here for a second, or my pointer in a second. Trying to get. Bear with me. Anyway, let's. While I'm trying to get the next slide up, tell us about the rosé, the rosato that you make also.
Yeah, the rosata, it's actually the story of a mistake because we have planted back in 2015 a new vineyards of Nebbiolo that the goal was planting the vineyards to produce a little bit extra bottles of our Lange Nebbiolo, our baby Barolo. But the point is that when we planted, we noticed that our supplier give us not the right family clone that we tend to use, that is the Lampia, but he gave us an old clone that is still existing in some areas of the Barolo, but it's in a really small percent, that is called Rosé, that was well known in the past for his pale color and his difficulties to get the right sugar ripening. That means low alcohol. As soon as we noticed a year after that the clone was not what we actually have ordered to our supplier, we decided to go for a rosé. It's a rosé that is extremely like Provence in style in terms of color, but then the Nebbiolo shows its specific characteristic except the tannin. We try as much as we can to avoid the tannic aspect of the Nebbiolo that won't be a very like good thing for a rosé.
Okay. I'm desperately trying to get all this back on screen here, but I can't for some reason, but that's not important. So, but
that's not too important.
We only have 2, 3, 4 minutes left, but this has been great. I appreciate this. And anything else you want to say? Let me ask you a final question about this year, about 2020, forgetting all the problems that all of us have had to go through. How is how are the vineyards looking right now?
So I want to end the interview, yes, spending a few words about 2020. 2020 is definitely a very difficult vintage. We had gone through a season where it was fantastic spring, fantastic flowering season, as with no rain. So we had that is good condition, especially for the formation of the grapes shape. But in end of June and July, we had a few water bomb from the sky that definitely is unusual for our what we consider our normality. We have 800, 900 milliliters of rain a year. We had 3 really like big storm where, for example, last week on Tuesday, we had 80 milliliters in half an hour.
Wow.
It's massive. So condition of humidity are pretty strong. We are fighting against mildew a lot. So we are not, we don't see any chance to go to the seaside in August, but grape selection, phytosanitary protection and works will be the key aspect and remarkable like work to do to achieve a great 2020 vintage. Anyway, as I say to you before, expect early harvest operation. I expect first week of September to go in the vineyards already to pick some grapes. The region, but fortunately not my area, get some hailstorm, especially part of the Verduno and Santa Maria in La Mora in early June. So far what was a storm there was just rain all over the area. So we had some area of the Barolo that they got some damages, but I would say nothing like terrible like 2002, for example. Okay. So we keep fighting, and definitely we hope and we cross the finger to make a good harvest in a strange vintage like 2020, where with COVID and other things, it's definitely like a not conventional year.
Okay. Yes, fingers crossed.